My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my 7-year marriage shifted from peaceful, familiar days into a cold ultimatum by the fireplace, and then ended with my husband losing his mind when he saw. On paper, my life was the enviably boring kind. I worked as an accountant at a mid-sized company, spending my days wrestling with balance sheets and Zoom meetings that dragged late into the evening. My husband, Ethan, was a software engineer, the type who always talked about optimizing everything, from code to the refrigerator, and lately, even our marriage. We had been married for 7 years. The first 6 were pretty okay. Not perfect, but enough for me to believe this was what adult happiness looked like. Cooking together in the evenings, arguing about what movie to watch, then making up on the couch with a cheap bottle of wine and a familiar embrace. The kind of normal that makes you think, well, this must be the happily ever after. A little tired, a little dull, but fine. Then, one Tuesday night, the kind of day when nothing big ever happens, Ethan stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of wine, posture straight, as if he'd rehearsed the moment in front of a mirror all week. He didn't look at me right away. His eyes weren't angry or ashamed, just cold as he said he needed a more modern kind of relationship. And then, as if reading off 2 bullet points in a presentation, he laid out the options: an open marriage or a divorce. No beating around the bush. No, I'm struggling inside. No, I still love you so much. Just 2 dry choices, as if he were suggesting we switch phone plans. Those words hung in the living room air like thick cigarette smoke, suffocating, refusing to dissipate. They split my life cleanly into before and after, sharp as a knife. Ethan stood there by the fireplace, back straight, no shaking, no hesitation. His voice was even, flat. I remember that moment clearly, the wall clock ticking too loudly, the yellow light in the living room suddenly harsh, and me standing across from the man with whom I had shared every small habit for 7 years. Realizing he was asking to break our marriage vows while keeping the house, the dinners, and a wife to come home to after he had explored himself with other women. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, waiting for the rest. "I think my needs are changing," he said, staring into the flames instead of at me. "There are modern impulses we should consider. Humans aren't designed to bond with just one person forever." I sat still on the sofa, my hand clenched around the TV remote. My heart beat slow and heavy, like it was counting down to an explosion I knew was coming. He went on, his tone still calm, like he was delivering a quarterly report. "I still love you. I still want you to be my home. But I need space to explore. I don't want to lose you, so I'm proposing that we open this marriage." "I need space to explore myself," I asked, my voice quiet but clear. "Explore with whom?" He shrugged, still avoiding my eyes. "No one specific. I just want the right. So if the opportunity comes up, I don't have to feel guilty." Then he paused, took a breath, and delivered the final sentence like stamping a contract. Either an open marriage or a divorce. Not an offer, a verdict. I looked at him, searching for a flicker of doubt, a trace of pain, something that proved he was being torn apart too. There was nothing, just the cold certainty of a man who had calculated every outcome and knew he would win. That wasn't a choice. It was 2 versions of loss wrapped into one sentence. One was losing him completely. The other was keeping him, but only the shell. A husband who came home after enjoying other women, still wanting me to cook, do laundry, smile at him as if nothing had happened. I thought about 7 years, about the house we were still paying off together, about the mornings he made coffee for me, about how empty this place would feel without him. And in that suffocating silence, I whispered, "Okay." Just one word. Tiny. But it weighed like a ton of bricks crushing my chest. Ethan exhaled in relief, stepped closer and hugged me. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." His voice was light, as if I'd just agreed to repaint the walls, not to let him sleep with other women. I didn't push him away. I just sat there, feeling like I had signed my own sentence with my own hands. The months that followed were a slow class in pain. Ethan threw himself into his new freedom like someone freshly released from prison. He smiled more, his eyes brighter, went to the gym regularly, bought new clothes. Every night there was a reason to go out. Meeting coworkers, networking events, catching up with old friends. He came home late, his jacket faintly carrying the scent of unfamiliar perfume. He talked about Maya from marketing with an excitement he used to reserve only for new projects at work. And then the next morning, he still kissed my forehead, still asked, "Did you sleep well?" Still wanted me to make coffee like always. As if the nights he didn't come home were just a personal hobby, completely unrelated to the real life we were supposedly still sharing. And me, I was numb. I didn't go out. I didn't date. The thought of sleeping with someone else made me feel disgusted, as if I would be the one cheating. Even though he had allowed it. Even though he was doing it every week. Even though Ethan had said it clearly. You can do it too, if you want. But I didn't want to. I never had. The framework in my head was still monogamy, still exclusive love, still the wedding vows that now sounded distant, like someone else's story. I couldn't flip a switch and turn myself into a different person just because he had done it first. I lay in bed, staring at the cold, empty space beside me, where he should have been lying. That space grew more defined, like a ghost stretched out between us, reminding me that he had chosen to leave even while keeping the house key. I agreed not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid. And Ethan knew that. He knew I wasn't going anywhere. He thought I would sit and wait forever, forever grateful for whatever scraps of attention he tossed back between his explorations. Loneliness was no longer a feeling. It became something tangible. Every night, Ethan didn't come home. The places that used to be home turned into haunted spaces. The sofa where we used to lie, wrapped around each other, watching movies, now held only me, sitting alone. The kitchen where he used to wrap his arms around me from behind now had only me standing at the sink, washing dishes, listening to the running water, and hearing it like crying. Everything was still intact, but everything carried the scent of loss, a scent only I could smell. I never expected that the first comfort would come from Caleb, the best friend Ethan had had since college, the man who had helped us move houses, who had laughed loudly at our weekend barbecues. That night, I was sitting alone in my car in a supermarket parking lot, a takeout box resting loosely on my lap, eating without really tasting anything, just staring at the fluorescent lights reflecting on the gray concrete, my mind completely empty. And that was when my phone vibrated. Caleb. His name made me pause for a few seconds before opening the message. A short line appeared. "Elena, are you okay?" "Ethan said you've been a bit tired lately." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back a mechanical reply. "I'm fine." I didn't expect that message to open everything up. And before I could think further, another one popped up. "A few friends called me. Ethan hasn't been doing well lately. I think you should know." I replied, "Thank you," because I didn't know what else to say. And Caleb almost immediately wrote back that if I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't use cliches or empty philosophy, I could call him. Then he invited me out to eat. Just food, just clarity. And for the first time in many days, what I felt wasn't anger or numbness, but relief, as if someone had finally spoken the same language as me. I agreed, and he chose a small place by the lake, the kind of place with ugly tables and chairs, decent coffee, and waitresses who call you honey or sweetie, regardless of your age. Caleb was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, a glass of water in front of him, a familiar face without pity, without shock, just calm waiting. He stood up to greet me. I slid into the chair, thanked him for meeting me. He said, "This week must have been hard," I corrected him. "This whole year." And he just smiled softly, as if he understood perfectly. We sat quietly for a moment, not an awkward silence, but the kind that comes before something important is said. Then Caleb sighed. "I don't know where to start." I smiled faintly. "Start anywhere." He gave a small laugh before saying that Ethan had been acting strange for months, talking in circles about breaking norms, emotional liberation, treating jealousy as fear. At first, he thought Ethan was just trying to sound profound, then realized he was trying to justify something. I just nodded, because I had known for a long time. Caleb said Ethan gradually stopped having normal conversations. Everything turned into philosophical lectures, always saying I was closed off, unwilling to evolve. And I replied that it was his favorite script. Caleb shook his head, said he had asked Ethan what that even meant. But Ethan never answered, because answering would mean facing the truth. When I told him that Ethan had ambushed me at the dinner table and handed me a choice, Caleb frowned, said he had heard, and relief spread clearly across his face, as if he had wanted to say this for a long time. He apologized to me, told me about my husband and Maya, that Ethan had taken her along to a few parties with friends. "You deserve more, someone who builds a family with you, not this thing he calls freedom." We talked more, not about Ethan, but about work, small things, things that reminded me who I was outside the role of a wife. And when it was time to leave, Caleb walked me to my car, kept a respectful distance, only said that if I needed help or just someone to listen, he was here, then hesitated and added, "Don't let Ethan twist the story. You're not the problem, he is." I said I knew, and this time I truly believed it. As I drove away, I felt something I had lost for weeks. Clarity, and I understood that Ethan wanted freedom, and he was about to get it, just not in the way he thought. After that night, Caleb didn't stop. He kept asking, not the kind of asking just to be polite, but because he genuinely wanted to know. "How are you today? Is there anything I can help with?" The concern was small, but sharp, like a knife cutting into the numb shell around me. Ethan, meanwhile, was completely absorbed in his exploration, never once asking how it felt for me when he came home with the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. Caleb asked, and he waited for my answer. Texts turned into phone calls. Caleb's voice was warm, slow, never rushing to interrupt. He listened as I talked about trivial things, work, the weather, a movie I just watched alone, and I realized I was talking more, laughing more. Then one Friday night, Ethan went out again. The house was so quiet I could clearly hear the refrigerator humming. I sat on the sofa, the second bottle of wine already half empty, my eyes stinging as I stared into nothing. My phone buzzed. "Caleb, I'm at the grocery store. Can I bring pizza and wine over? I don't want you sitting alone like this." I hesitated, then typed, "Okay." When the doorbell rang, I opened it and saw Caleb standing there, bags of food in hand, his smile a little shy, like he was afraid of intruding. We ate pizza on the living room floor, backs against the sofa, watching an old movie we both already knew the ending to. I laughed out loud for the first time in months. Caleb didn't push me to talk about Ethan. He was just there, present, steady, asking nothing more than letting me be myself. Evenings with Caleb began to change everything. We talked about all kinds of trivial things. The book I was halfway through, an old movie he'd loved since his college days, even the way his dog snored loudly whenever it dreamed. Those conversations were so ordinary, they were almost silly, but they pulled me back to myself. For the first time in months, I was no longer Ethan's wife in that strange open marriage. I was Elena again, the woman who liked black coffee with no sugar, who giggled at corny jokes, who had her own opinions about the ending of an old worn-out movie. Caleb looked at me differently, not the distracted glance Ethan had lately, his eyes often glued to his phone or passing through me as if I were just part of the wall. Caleb looked directly at me, his gaze warm, attentive, as if everything I said was worth remembering. He would ask, "What do you think about that ending?" And then truly wait for my answer. No interruptions, no changing the subject. Just listening. Caleb looked at me intently, as if every word I said mattered. 3 weeks after that first pizza night, Caleb drove me home after a long, aimless drive around the city. We stood at my door, the night air cool. He paused, hands in his coat pockets, eyes lingering on me, longer than usual. There was no sudden spark, no dramatic background music. He just leaned in, slowly, and kissed me. A warmth spread gradually, from my lips, through my whole body, as if we were both surprised by how natural it felt. Not rushed, not forbidden. Just a real connection, growing out of conversations, out of steady care, out of the way he made me feel valued without conditions. I didn't pull away. I rose onto my toes and kissed him back. After that, quiet dates in peaceful cafes, long drives with no destination, became a calm oasis in the emotional storm Ethan had created in my home, where every interaction before had been heavy with resentment, unspoken guilt, and the painful awareness that my husband was pursuing other women while still expecting me to be grateful for his half-hearted attention. With Caleb, I slowly understood that this relationship wasn't about opposing Ethan, wasn't an act of revenge, but a refuge, a place where I experienced love given freely, without bargaining, without demanding that I sacrifice my values or emotional needs in exchange for someone else's presence. And it was that realization that made me see how I had traded away my self-respect just to hold on to a love already twisted by someone else's selfishness. Then Ethan started to notice. At first, it was just casual questions, his tone trying to sound normal. "Where did you go last night? You came home pretty late." I answered briefly, "Met a friend." He nodded, but his eyes darkened slightly. Then the questions grew sharper. "Which friend? Why don't you tell me about it?" Every time my phone vibrated, he glanced over. Not a normal glance, but a sharp, suspicious look, as if I were hiding a bomb in my pocket. I thought to myself, "You're the one who demanded freedom. Now you're angry because I dared to use it?" The hypocrisy was painfully obvious. He wanted to roam free, to explore, without constraints. But the moment I took one small step through the door he had flung wide open, he lost his mind. He wasn't angry because he was losing me. He was angry because he was losing control. He hated that. Ethan's silence became a weapon. He didn't yell, didn't smash things. He just went silent. The heavy, smoldering, lingering kind of silence. Passing each other in the kitchen without a word. Sitting across from each other at dinner, hearing only the clink of fork against plate. The house turned into a minefield. I walked lightly, holding my breath, never knowing when an innocent remark would hit a tripwire. Even opening the fridge felt tense. Asking, "How was your day?" felt dangerous. He used silence to punish me for daring not to sit still and wait for him. Meanwhile, with Caleb, everything was the complete opposite. With Caleb, he was a refuge, a place where I could breathe, laugh, be myself without measuring every word to see if it might anger someone. Caleb didn't demand gratitude for being kind. He was simply kind, willingly, without conditions. Ethan, on the other hand, turned attention into a reward, something I had to earn by obeying his rules. The contrast grew sharper by the day. One life was a tense house, where even normal things became dangerous. The other was warm evenings, where even silence felt safe because it carried no threat. I realized I was living two lives, one inside four walls that Ethan controlled with deadly silence, and one outside, with Caleb, where I began to remember what it actually felt like to be loved. Not love exchanged for compliance, but love because I was worthy of it. Then came the night when everything exploded. Caleb came over to pick up the jacket he'd left behind last time. I opened the door, forcing a smile because I knew Ethan had come home unexpectedly early. The three of us were trapped in the living room, the air thick, like a glass display room where one wrong movement could shatter everything. Ethan sat on one corner of the sofa, deliberately glued to his phone screen, his finger scrolling up and down, as if he were deeply busy with some other world. In truth, he was pretending, avoiding looking at us, avoiding acknowledging the reality he himself had created with that damn ultimatum. Caleb and I sat across from him, trying to make small talk. The weather, work, scattered polite phrases. But my voice trembled slightly, and Caleb's eyes kept drifting to me without thinking. Everything unsaid was screaming in the silence. Then Caleb set his glass down hard on the coffee table. The sound of glass hitting wood rang out, dry and sharp, slicing through the room. I realized in that moment, this was no longer about politeness or keeping the peace, but about a decent person refusing to keep participating in a farce designed solely to protect the comfort of a manipulator. "Ethan," he said, his voice low but firm as a hammer, "put the phone down. We need to talk." Ethan scoffed, still not looking up. "Talk about what? About how you're sleeping with my wife?" Caleb didn't flinch. He looked straight at Ethan, eyes unblinking. "I love her." The room felt like all the air had been sucked out. Those three words landed heavy like a physical punch. Not because they were cruel, but because they were too real, too sincere. Ethan laughed, but the sound was twisted, his eyes flashing with anger. "What did you say?" Caleb didn't repeat himself. He just looked at Ethan, then glanced at me for a brief moment, his gaze so gentle it made my chest tighten. Caleb went on, clearly stating that he didn't love me because of this situation, that perhaps he had loved me quietly for a long time, through the years of watching Ethan build a life with the woman he cherished, and that this admission exposed the depth of sacrifice and sincerity buried under loyalty to friendship, until the way Ethan treated me made silence no longer noble, but complicit in slowly destroying me. Then his voice hardened. "But I can't stand by and watch you hurt her anymore. Not anymore." Ethan shot to his feet, face flushed. "You're a traitor! How long have you been waiting for your chance?" Caleb shook his head slowly. "You're the one who opened the door. You gave the ultimatum, you burned the house down, and now you're angry because she found a way out?" I sat there, between two men who had once been pillars of my life, now facing each other on the brink of collision. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was because, for the first time, someone was standing up for me, not to possess me, but to protect me. Caleb didn't shout. He simply spoke the truth Ethan never wanted to hear. And in that moment, everything changed forever. A man who had once placed friendship and harmony above all else had reached his final limit, where protecting a vulnerable person mattered more than any old loyalty, because some injustices, if not stopped, will continue to grow in the darkness of silence. Ethan reacted almost immediately, his voice breaking into bitter accusations as he pointed at Caleb and called him a snake, someone who had waited for the right moment to slip into our marriage, someone who had exploited my trust, this home. And in that rage, I saw with painful clarity how a manipulator avoids responsibility for his own choices by inventing a convenient enemy, dumping all the consequences of his ultimatum and his prolonged cruelty onto the person who dared to respond naturally to the pain Ethan himself had caused, instead of admitting that he was the one who created it, who cleared the path for someone else to step in with the kindness and care I should have received from my husband. Caleb didn't step back, his voice low but sharp, cutting straight through Ethan's fury as he said, "You're the one who gave her the ultimatum. You're the one who burned this house down, and now you're angry because she found a lifeboat." A sentence that fully exposed the absurdity of Ethan's anger, a man who demanded the right to enjoy every benefit of his new freedom, yet couldn't tolerate the idea that I might also find real love within the very circumstances he had created. The two of them stood facing each other, like two pillars that had once supported my life, now heading toward an unavoidable collision, while I was trapped between them, feeling both like the cause and the victim of this battle, carrying a guilt that didn't belong to me, as if I were responsible for the chaos born from others fighting over me, rather than recognizing that it all stemmed from Ethan's original selfish decision. And then, when rage could no longer shield him from anything, Ethan collapsed, breaking down in tears. His voice shattered as he admitted that his demand for an open marriage had been a terrible mistake, a selfish illusion born from fear and insecurity. But those words came too late, not enough to mend the tears he had inflicted on me and on his friendship with Caleb, because some betrayals, once committed, cannot be erased by regret alone. When Ethan choked out that he never thought I would actually find someone, especially Caleb, the final naked truth emerged. He had believed I would remain isolated forever, always there waiting for him to return from his adventures, never imagining that I might realize I deserved to be treated better, to be loved by someone who valued my presence and emotional well-being more than his own selfish desires. Ethan lifted his head, eyes red and swollen, his voice hoarse from crying. "Can we go back? Erase these 6 months, just you and me, like before?" He looked at me, waiting, as if all it would take was a nod for everything to snap back into place, as if there had never been an ultimatum, never been nights he didn't come home. I looked back at him, really looked, and I realized something cold, something painfully clear. That threat had changed something fundamental inside me. The woman who once whispered, "Okay," because she was afraid of losing him forever, wasn't sitting here anymore. She had slowly died in the months of lying beside that cold, empty space, in evenings pretending to sleep when he came home late, in forced smiles while he talked about Maya from marketing. In her place stood a different woman, one who had tasted genuine care, one who knew she was worth more than emotional scraps. I looked at Ethan, then at Caleb, who was standing there quietly, not pushing, just waiting for my decision. My past with my husband, 7 years, deep, complicated, once my entire world. Now it was poisoned. Every good memory coated with pain, resentment, and voluntary betrayal. The future I began to imagine with Caleb, uncertain but bright, built on a kindness I had forgotten I deserved. I was torn between two paths. One was old love, familiar, even if it had turned into a toxin. The other was a new possibility, where I didn't have to beg for decency, where I was loved for who I was, not because I was the safe choice. I realized I had been playing by the rules of a game I never wanted to join. Now I had to hold the fragments, 2 shattered relationships, 2 men who had once been the center of my life, and the remains of the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant compromise, fear, and accepting pain just to avoid loss. I had blamed myself for months, but now I saw it clearly. This wasn't my fault. This was the consequence of a selfish decision, a decision that should never have been placed on my shoulders. Is there any relationship damaged this deeply that can truly be repaired? I looked at him, my voice calm but firm. It can't. What the hell is going on here? A woman's voice burst out, sharp and urgent, cutting across my answer. None of the 3 of us moved right away. The sound echoed through the living room like a system error, something that didn't belong to the unfolding script, yet forced everything to stop. Ethan was the first to flinch. Obvious, almost embarrassingly so. He snapped his head toward the door, eyes wide. Maya was standing there. She wore a long camel-colored coat, her hair tied up high, no makeup, yet still beautiful in a sharp, confident way. The kind of beauty I had heard Ethan describe with strange enthusiasm over the past few months. Ethan jumped to his feet when he saw her. His face went from pale to ghostly white in a single heartbeat. "Maya, why are you here?" Maya stopped in the middle of the living room, a few steps away from Ethan. She didn't look at him right away. She looked at me first. No pity, no triumph, only a deep, exhausted weariness. I heard everything, she said evenly, through the slightly open window on the porch. I've been standing outside since Caleb said, "I love her." Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He lifted a hand as if trying to grasp the air. Maya turned to him then, eyes meeting his. You told me you had left her, that this marriage existed only on paper. You said you were separated. You said she controlled you, held you back, didn't support your growth. She paused for a beat, her voice still calm, but I could hear something breaking underneath. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Maya, listen. Don't say my name. She cut him off. Her voice shook. You told me what we had was real. You said the open marriage was just a transitional phase. You said she would understand, that you would leave. She turned to look at me, her eyes confused, as if trying to fit me into the story Ethan had told. A completely different picture. I said nothing. I just looked at her. And for the first time that entire night, I saw real panic in Ethan. It's not like that, he said quickly, both hands raised as if trying to calm the whole room. I was trying to handle everything in the most civilized way. Civilized? Maya laughed, but the sound broke into a sob. You asked me to help you figure out how to talk to your wife about an open marriage. You said you needed me, that what we had was the real connection, deep, modern. Maya let out a soft laugh, but it wasn't joyful. It was the laugh of someone who had just realized she'd been deceived so thoroughly that she herself had believed it. I believed you. I told my family about a man who was deep, brave enough to live honestly. I thought you were sincere. She stared at Ethan without blinking. But you never intended to leave, did you? You just wanted both. You wanted me as the secret lover, a compliant wife waiting at home. You wanted freedom, but not responsibility. Ethan shook his head frantically, his voice hoarse. Maya, it's not that. I planned to... Planned what? Maya cut in. Planned to keep lying to me for how much longer? She looked at me, then at Caleb. Her gaze softened. You should run, she said quietly, for the first time with genuine sincerity. Run far away. Don't look back. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt no jealousy, no resentment. Just saw another woman who had woken up, who had been fooled by the same script. I nodded slightly. I already am. Maya turned to Ethan one last time. I'm done, she said. With you, with this hollow philosophy. Don't text me, don't call, don't show up in front of me again. She turned, opened the door, and walked out. The door closed behind her, not hard, not angry, just final. The living room fell silent again. Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. No more tears, no more excuses. Just the emptiness of a man who had lost everything, not because I chose Caleb, but because his own lies had come back to tear him apart. Caleb stood still, saying nothing. He just looked at me, his gaze gentle, patient, as if to say, Now you see clearly, don't you? And I did. The door had closed. Not loudly, not violently, but for the last time. No matter how much Ethan cried, no matter how sincerely he regretted it, the woman who had once loved him unconditionally had changed forever. There was nothing left to hold on to. After that night, everything moved forward, like a river that could not turn back. Ethan moved out within a few weeks, taking with him messy boxes and belated promises that no one believed anymore. I signed the divorce papers without my hand shaking, sitting in the lawyer's office with a cup of coffee gone cold on the table, looking out the window where snow fell softly, whitening the familiar streets that had once been home. The house we once shared was sold. I stood in the empty living room one last time, my hand brushing the wall where he had once hung our wedding photo, now marked only by bare screw holes. The clink of keys dropping onto the wooden floor echoed like a final goodbye, and I stepped out, shutting the door behind me without looking back, feeling as if I had just shed an old, heavy layer of clothing, letting freedom rush in, chilly but strangely clean and fresh. I moved into a smaller apartment near the park, where every morning I woke to sunlight filtering through thin curtains, made coffee just for myself without waiting for anyone, sat by the window watching leaves tremble in the breeze, and thought about the months that had passed, no longer with resentment, only with lessons etched deep, repeating softly in my mind, like the whisper of wind, that real love never demands the sacrifice of one's own worth, that true freedom is breathing without fear. With Caleb, we moved slowly, not rushing in, as if to make up for lost time. Afternoons walking through the park, his hand brushing lightly against my shoulder, his eyes meeting mine with a gentleness that reminded me how much I was worth, that sincere connection can heal even the deepest wounds, and I realized I was living, not merely enduring anymore. Now, every morning, I wake up in the new apartment, open the window to let in the cool air. I make coffee for myself, watch the leaves sway outside the park, and smile. I have found real freedom, not the kind Ethan used to talk about, but the freedom to be myself, to be loved without having to trade myself away.